Welcome back to another Polaris trip report, and even though Polaris is a pretty well documented product, today we'll be talking about the seat that no one really likes to talk about, but sometimes we just end up getting. But before we get into that, let's talk about where we're flying from and where we're flying to. Our journey starts today at San Francisco's International Terminal G, which houses all of United's long-haul flights as well as most of the other Star Alliance carriers. From San Francisco, we go 10 hours and 5 minutes across the continental US out over into the Atlantic Ocean, entering Europe and finally arriving into Paris Charles de Gaulle International Airport. Charles de Gaulle International Airport, like most other European airports, is located much outside the city, in this case at the northeast end of Paris. Check-in for our flight begins back in San Francisco International Airport, where there's a dedicated check-in line for Premier 1K passengers as well as United Polaris Business class passengers. At this time, there were definitely a lot of Europe and Asia-bound flights, making it rather busy time here at SFO. Other Star Alliance carriers like Lufthansa had also just opened its counters for its first flights of the day. After a rather short queue in security thanks to TSA pre-check, it was straight off to the United Polaris Lounge. This is the shining jewel of the ground experience, and you're about to see why. The Polaris Lounge access rules are quite simple. You can either be flying Polaris business class to access the lounge like we are, or you can be flying long-haul business class or first class on a Star Alliance carrier, or you can actually even access the lounge arriving off a Polaris flight and connecting onto a United flight. As you may have noticed, no level of status can get you into this lounge. It's strictly a premium cabin travel lounge. The Polaris Lounge in San Francisco is huge, spanning 29,000 square feet because it's meant to cater to all the long-haul Star Alliance flights. There's 2 levels to the lounge, and currently we are on the first level, where there's really not much except just seating as well as the showers, which we'll look at later. The signature of United's Polaris Lounge is this cubicle style seating where there's 2 different power ports and 2 different USB ports per person. Even at the lower level, there was a pretty good view of all the planes getting ready to go all around the world to their respective destinations, including our 777 right here, which I thought would be ready to go, but more on that later. The only other things that were there at the lower level was a light beverage stand with tea, coffee, and juices, and the showers, which, like I said, we'll come back to later. Downstairs is cool and all, and definitely a quiet place. However, upstairs is where the real fun is at. The escalators to go up were rather narrow, definitely not American sized. Only once you reach the top do you actually get a grasp of how truly big this lounge actually is. The main part of this lounge opens up to another area where there's more of that cubicle style seating as well as other kinds of seating. The bar itself is very impressive, well designed, and can make pretty much any drink that you'd want. As far as food goes, the Polaris Lounge is definitely on the more inclusive side and has a wide variety of dining options depending on what you're looking for. When it comes to the Polaris Lounges, my rule of thumb is quite simple. Screw the vegetables, go chase some meats and cheeses, and walk it off later, which might sound unhealthy in practice, but I have my ways to compensate, or at least that's what I like to gaslight myself into thinking. Look, alcohol just goes down so much better with meats and cheeses as opposed to vegetables, what can I say? As you can see, the buffet is quite extensive, spreading across cold items and hot items. However, that's not the only way you can get food. If you're at one of these lounges and you have time, please don't forget about the restaurant, as it's probably the best part. Once you get seated, they offer you a drink, give you the menu, and pretty much you can order whatever you want. The seating area is well situated and you get great views of any departing flights and the west end of the G gates. Now I do have a confession to make. These particular restaurant clips are from another Polaris Lounge visit, as for this particular day the waitlist was just far too long and I would have missed my flight. So, in typical Rohit fashion, I just simply drank my sorrows away, as I could not bear to stand the pain and agony from not having been able to visit the restaurant today. I even went to the bathroom to shed some tears and just let it out. These particular bathrooms are just for general purpose use, such as washing your hands, taking a bio break, and the like. There are another set of bathrooms downstairs that are along with each of the showers. As I hinted at earlier, unlike other Polaris Lounges, this particular Polaris Lounge doesn't just serve United flights, but also all the other Star Alliance carriers leaving from Terminal G, and hence why there is so much more additional seating just to accommodate all those additional passengers. As mentioned earlier, the Polaris Lounge does afford you the ability to freshen up and take a shower before your flight, and that's exactly what we're about to do. Each individual shower suite is quite spacious, having its own sink, bathroom, bench, and waterfall shower. The showers have both a telephone and waterfall mode, and simply click the button in order to switch between the two modes. It's that easy. United does provide soap for the shower, however I only trust the toiletries I bring, so I don't ever really end up using these. Okay, now unless you want to get me in trouble, this is the part where I turn the cameras off, I think. The G gates is essentially one single long line, and our gate was first in line at G1, which for someone as lazy as me worked out quite nicely. Our aircraft today is a standard 777-200, and while I did get here just a few minutes before boarding, it really didn't matter anyways because we ended up being delayed. Now, as much as I fly United, their boarding process is one giant cluster. I mean, as a Polaris business class passenger, you're most likely in group 1, but you could also be in one of 5 different pre-boarding groups. In my particular case, I had 1K status with United, so I was part of the pre-boarding group. Honestly, the 1K pre-boarding benefit is cool and all, but if I'm flying Polaris, it really doesn't matter because there's plenty enough storage space for everybody. But if I'm flying economy, then it makes all the difference because then I can make sure my baggage is pretty close to where I'm sitting. Now, facial recognition is cool and all, and it generally keeps the experience hands-free. However, this particular scanner just did not like my face at all for whatever reason, so I assumed I'd ended up on some kind of government watch list. Thank you. In a world where a lot of airports use one door for boarding, SFO still uses 2, so we boarded through the forward door of the aircraft. From there I made my way over to the right side of the aircraft where all the L seats are. I will say these 777-200s are way far past their prime, but United sure does know how to put lipstick on a pig. Polaris business class on these aircraft follow in a 1-2-1 configuration where the odd numbered seats are much closer to the window and private as they're further away from the aisle, but the even numbered seats are angled more towards the aisle and therefore a little bit less private. If you're a couple traveling together and you really want to sit next to each other, you want to go for the odd numbered middle section as those seats are right next to each other and away from the aisle. However, I can also totally see a world in which you guys would want to be as far away from each other as possible. In this case, any other seat is fair game. Coming back to real life, we'll see what these seats actually look like as we walk by one of the even numbered seats and then one of the odd numbered seats, and then again even and odd, and you can clearly see the difference between what is a private seat and what are these seats that angle out towards the aisle. Like I said at the start of this video, things don't always go our way and sometimes we end up with seats that we don't necessarily want. That said, the seat is still quite comfortable. Waiting for you at every seat is what I like to call the Polaris stack. It's a stack of a pillow, a gel cooling pillow, a mattress topper, and a blanket. All the amenities you need for Polaris business class, and in my opinion the best business class bedding on this planet. Every seat comes with a large TV screen which is honestly quite responsive to the touch, as well as a coat hook right next to it. Right below the TV screen is a USB-A port for any of your devices that still use it, and right below the coat hook are the seat controls, which I honestly thought were quite intuitive. So for example, this twisting knob moves your seat into flatbed position, but there's an indicator that lets you know when your seat is not in the upright position. When it illuminates green, you're back upright and ready for takeoff. There's also a center console for convenient placement of smaller items and drinks during your flight. Each Polaris passenger also gets a water bottle, which is really important because you can get really dehydrated during your flight. There's also another storage compartment which houses the headphones as well as another little bit of storage. I don't know what you could put in there, but something. And just above the center console is also the power port and a remote which controls the TV. In Polaris, when you arrive at your seat, the menu is already there for you so that the crew can take your orders on the ground. Oh yeah, speaking of food, let's check out how the tray table at this seat works. The seat tray table is right below the monitor, and to activate it or to bring it out, you just push it in and it comes out automatically, and you can unfold it and expand it to your liking and push it back and forth so you can get up in the middle of a meal if you have to. And to push it in, lock it, push it, and it's in place. Now, as I'm sitting here and complaining to myself about how inaccessible my window is, we had a much more serious problem for this flight.
Operations is aware of it. We'll have more information in a few minutes. Please be patient with us. We'll get something figured out as soon as I have more information. I will let you know. Thank you.
So we had a hydraulic fluid leak on the left main gear of the aircraft, which is responsible for many important flight operations such as the landing gear operation, brake systems, and many other important control surfaces. Basically, as a pilot myself, I'm telling you that there are many things that I would be happy to fly without, however, a hydraulic leak is absolutely not one of them. Thankfully, the crew did come around with water and sparkling water while we were on the ground. However, no food, and I was quite literally starving at this point, so I asked them to bring back one of those pretzel bags from economy class, and they were more than happy to do so. Guys, just to put into perspective how late we were, our flight was supposed to leave at 2 o'clock, and this Turkish Airlines next to us doesn't even arrive until 5:30. As soon as we crossed 10,000 feet, Wi-Fi was made available to all passengers. You can either have it for free if you just want to send messages, or paid options depending on your usage. There's 3 different tiers of usage, and generally the highest tier one is the most worthwhile. $21 for a full 10-hour flight is generally pretty good in my opinion, however I don't recommend it on eastbound flights such as this one since you'll likely be spending more time resting than not. Back to the service side of things, on this particular flight, the crew understood the assignment. As soon as they could, they got up and got hot towels going for all of us. As far as amenity kits go, this honestly has everything I think I would need. There's socks, there's an eye mask, there's toothbrush and toothpaste, there's napkins if you need, and even facial creams. I don't even use the eye mask when I sleep, but I know a lot of other people who do, and so it's there as you need it. The kit itself this time around was a cute away bag design, however, every time I fly United it seems to change. United has a very responsive, non-laggy in-flight entertainment, and the selection of movies and TV shows is pretty good. The purser on today's flight was a fine gentleman by the name of Brian Fleming, and he was just here to make sure we had a good flight. One of the best crews I've had for sure. With the amount that I fly United, I've seen the full spectrum of crew from really bad to really good, and Brian for sure was on the upper end of things. I always try to converse with the crew on each of my long haul flights, and Brian was great to chat with. Okay, I swear I'm not an alcoholic when I say this, but as soon as the champagne came, I just wolfed it down. I was starving at this point and I needed any form of carbs I could get. And yes, champagne has carbs and it is a form of carbs. Now, shortly after that whole fiasco, a crew member arrived with the starters and main course served on a single tray. I really wish they served it the way they did before COVID, where starters and main course were served separately, because now while I eat starters, the main course gets cold. Speaking of cold, the starter was a cold ginger beef, which honestly tasted alright. I really couldn't taste the ginger much, but the beef was fine. The main course on the other hand was better. The chicken was actually quite well cooked. I was able to cut through it entirely with my fork, which is generally a litmus test that I use to see how well a chicken is cooked. And by that time it was pretty well soaked up in the sauce, which made it all that more tasty. The fries and the shallots and vegetables in the back had also soaked up all the sauce, so they were also pretty tasty to eat as well. By the time I was done eating, there was still a decent amount of sauce left over. Use the bread. We all like to ignore that bread that's as rock hard as a grenade. This is the perfect time to use it. One thing that United does well is that there's always a sumptuous side salad provided with every meal, which is always good for fiber, but it's always dry and rubbery when leaving from a US hub. Like I was saying, use whatever remaining bread you have and soak up all that sauce. It's the best use of it. No matter how good or bad the appetizers and main course were, when it comes to dessert, United will never let you down. Behold, I present to you Diabetes on Wheels, the United Polaris Sundae cart. This has the usual vanilla ice cream and sometimes other flavors, and then the usual toppings of caramel, chocolate sauce, whipped cream, cherries, and anything else that they might have on that particular flight. There's also cheese plate and usually some other dessert option that comes with it. On this particular flight, it was an egg tart, and I would be foolish to not forget to have port wine as well with all of this. So, with all of these dessert options, how do you know which one to pick in case you want all of them? Just to recap our options, we usually have the ice cream sundae, a cheese plate, and whatever other sweet dish depending on which destination you're leaving from. You'll always want to take the ice cream sundae because once they pack that away, it's hard to take it out in the middle of the flight. The thing is, with the cheese plate and the other sweets, whatever is unused and left over becomes a part of the mid-flight snack. So you can always get those in the middle of the flight, but you can't get the ice cream sundae after they put it away. For this flight's dessert, I decided to completely indulge in the diabetes cart. My ice cream sundae included whipped cream, chocolate chips, chocolate sauce, and caramel, and I couldn't forget the cheese plate, of course. A lot of airlines will provide different kinds of desserts, but sometimes a good old bowl of ice cream is all you really need. The lavatory amenities are fairly basic, with facial mist, some kind of garment spray, and hand cream. Now, with the face mist, that's always an interesting story with me. Every time I see this, I want to spray my face and think it's going to make me feel all refreshed, but it's really all about the same. At this point, with the crazy delay and all the in-flight shenanigans, I was pretty tired and ready to sleep. With the single turn of a dial, this seat turns from a normal seat into a full flat bed. When Polaris first came out, and even to this day, a big part of its branding is its sleep aspect, and from the gel cooling pillow to the duvet and blankets provided, it does a phenomenal job of that. A few hours before landing, I woke up to the lights turning on in the cabin, and at this time the crew were just coming around with hot towels for everybody. Breakfast on Polaris usually entails a sweet and a savory option, and I pretty much always opt for the savory option because the sweet option is just too sweet. Breakfast today was a concoction of egg bites, mushrooms, and tomatoes, and the egg really wasn't all that flavorful, but I guess that's what you have salt and pepper for. The mushrooms, on the other hand, on their own were pretty good. There was also a bowl of fruits provided, and it's honestly pretty hard to screw up fruits, but relatively they were still pretty fresh. Oh, by the way, earlier when I said the eggs needed salt, I really meant it needed the whole packet, and then probably a few more. They also did provide Chobani yogurt, but I pretty much always avoid Chobani yogurt on United because it's always the flavored ones that have a lot of added sugar. The plain ones are good, those ones are really good. We were also given a croissant, but it came out of a package, and given that we're flying to Paris, I really didn't want to see what the French people in Polaris had to say about this.
Passengers that are making onward international connections in Paris, you'll simply follow the...
As we were making our way hastily towards Paris, we got great and awesome views on this clear day of London Heathrow. A clear day? In London? Does one exist? Apparently it did today. Also on this clear day, I was helping myself to a handful of sanitizing wipes. You see sanitizing wipes? What I see are free laptop and cell phone cleaners. Give me the whole thing. As the crew began landing preparations, the purser himself came around and gave all Global Services and 1K members a thank you card, which I thought was a really nice note. At the end of the day, the United Airlines experience is going to be a perfectly comfortable way to cross the ocean, no matter which ocean it is. The food will be hit or miss, it depends on what airport you're leaving from and the food made on that particular day. The crew can be hit or miss. On this particular flight, the crew was fantastic, But the one consistent thing is you will get a good night's rest. The seat is comfortable and the bedding is phenomenal. There's also a great in-flight entertainment, so this flight really has everything that you would need for a long-haul flight. However, if you go in expecting 5-star food, you'd probably want to pick a different airline. I mean, ultimately, as someone who spends a lot of time on United, I definitely don't turn a blind eye to their flaws, but at the end of the day, they're a comfortable way to fly and they get the job done.
On behalf of United Airlines and Star Alliance, we'd like to be the first to welcome you to the Charles de Gaulle International Airport, serving Paris, France. It's again Saturday. On behalf of your entire flight crew and all of us here at United Airlines,